All right, we got Roger Stone. Roger Stone, you there?
I'm indeed. I'm glad to be with you, Rob.
I'm glad to be with you. I didn't know that Fox News political correspondents are outing you now. This was news to me. I just got this.
It's really quite extraordinary, and we've got time to deal with it. But basically, if you took every single fake news story generated in the last year and you rolled them all into one, half-truths, partial truths, non-truths, inaccuracies, and put them in one story, well, there it is. We can knock this down. It's the same old Russian collusion delusion. But also on the menu, Republican primaries today in California and Alabama. Very important contest. Talk a little bit about that. And, of course, the big issue in the...
All right, second hour of the War Room. Thank you for joining us. We have Roger Stone, who is just getting into the details of this little juicy article from Think Progress. And they want you to think they're the bastion of real news, of course. Yet they're doing nothing but recycling old memes and turning Roger Stone into a political mastermind. Not that he isn't, but they're turning him into an international spy with an extra helping of political mastermindery. Well, and Roger, before we even get to that, I have a quick announcement. We're going to have a protest on Sunday that I'm going to send people the details to in just a little bit. But Bill Clinton's coming to Austin, Texas. So we're going to have a little Me Too protest. All right, Roger, take it away.
Thanks, Rob. Look, Carl Cameron, formerly of Fox, is a good guy and a pretty good political reporter, but I guess he's trying to sell books here. He is claiming that I somehow coordinated messages with a Russian hacker. But the deeper you read, essentially what he says is, well, the Russians, by watching what Stone was doing online, could emulate it. That's pretty weak. But then Think Progress, a lefty fake news site, uses this as the hook for a compendium of every false narrative out there, coordinating with Guccifer 2.0, dining with Julian Assange, the emails that were uncovered by the Wall Street Journal should have been turned over to the House Intelligence Committee, but they weren't. That's false. They fell outside their very specifically worded request. This is a compendium of every BS fake news meme over the last 2 years. Tyler Nixon, our legal analyst, going to join us here a little bit and help us break it down. But in the meantime, Rob, I do want Info Warriors to be very focused on some of the key contests today across the country. In California, where the jungle primary system allows party candidates of all parties to run in one mega primary, where the two top vote getters face off, assuming nobody gets 50% of the vote in the first round, is going to be very interesting to see whether the two top vote getters in California are one Democrat and one Republican, two Democrats, and if it is a Republican, whether it will be Chicago John Cox, a moderate Republican, or true-believing Ronald Reagan conservative Travis Allen, who joined us yesterday here at the War Room. Also in the hunt, of course, is Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, the current lieutenant governor, former mayor of San Francisco, thought to be the front runner, but nowhere near 50% of the vote. And then, of course, former Los Angeles Mayor Anthony Villaraigosa, with his own Hispanic appeal and a strong can't get out the vote campaign machinery. So how will this come out? Will there be a Democrat-Republican contest? Will Travis Allen get by a multimillionaire Hillary Clinton supporter, never Trumper John Cox in the primary? The other key contest in California to watch carefully is the re-election bid of Orange County Congressman Dana Rohrabacher. Rohrabacher is the only member of Congress who is known to have met with Julian Assange. He is a longtime advocate for the legalization of cannabis. He is in a jungle primary with a very well-regarded former Assemblyman Scott Baugh, also a conservative Republican, and 16 Democrats. Now, this district is not as Republican or as conservative as it used to be. And in a contest with either a Democrat or with Baugh, Rohrabacher could be pressed. Interestingly enough, most of the polling I have seen has him at about 30%. Not very strong for an incumbent, and in many cases, people didn't know that Dana referred to a man. This is going to be a key contest to watch through the night. Also, very key in the state of Alabama, where former Attorney General Troy King is facing Rhino Republican, former Democrat, flip-flopper Steve Marshall, who's trying to fool the people of Alabama into believing that he's a Trump Republican. At the same time, Alice Martin, a third candidate in that race, who claimed that she did not seek the appointment as Attorney General from corrupt outgoing Governor Robert Bentley, but then got exposed right here at InfoWars when we produced the letter in which she asked for the appointment, also trying to pose as a Trump Republican. Here's what I know. When Troy King was the Attorney General of Alabama, violent crime was at a 30-year low. Under the current Attorney General, Steve, the current incumbent, they have hit a 20-year high. Steve Marshall is not what he says he is. We will be watching this. We call it the Rhino Watch. We'll be watching this race also very, very closely.
And if I could bust in real quick, Roger, Travis Allen has a great one-liner, which I think he said yesterday on the War Room, but he also said it in a debate. Do we have that ready? Let's play this.
The question is very simple, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't trust Gavin with his best friend's wife, how can you trust him with your state?
And he literally dropped the mic after saying that. And that has to go back to Gavin Newsom, I guess, betted and ended up marrying the wife of his best friend.
And incredibly, he divorced Kimberly Guilfoyle, now of Fox, one of the most beautiful and intelligent women that I know, a former prosecutor and a real star. So I would say that Gavin Newsom made numerous mistakes. It will be very interesting to see also how the Maxine Waters Omar Navarro race stacks up. Now, there are multiple Republicans in that race. Navarro, who's discovered by Owen Schroyer right here at InfoWars, has run a very strong net-savvy campaign. Maxine Waters, of course, would have an enormous edge because of the enormously Democrat leanings of this district. But it's important to recognize that this district, once majority or at least plurality African-American, is now plurality Hispanic. And there's a growing Hispanic Democratic constituency in the district. This is among the very poorest and destitute districts in the country. Who will be in the two top vote getters? Will it be Maxine Waters and Omar Navarro? Well, we're going to see later tonight. Thank you for joining us here at the War Room. I want to remind you that Rob and I could not do what we're doing here without your loyal support at the Infowars.com store. And now, at a very special price, you can get my new book, Stone's Rules. And as I have said, for InfoWarriors who purchase it online, if you buy it at InfoWars and you mail it to me, I will mail it back to you signed at my own expense. Now, whether you are a conservative, a libertarian, non-political, even a Bernie Sanders progressive, I think you can benefit and enjoy this important book, essentially my rules of the road, the maxims and guidelines that I have learned in a 40-year career in the arena. But if you're not looking for a book today, look at our terrific nutraceutical products. Look at our T-shirts with the First Amendment themes. We have no corporate sponsors breathing down our neck telling us what we can and cannot cover in our coverage. This is entirely independent investigative journalism supported by you. So whether it is Brain Force Plus or Super Male Vitality, Immune Wall, or your copy of Stone's Rules, please go to the Infowars.com site now and give us your support. As you know, Alex Jones has a major expansion afoot. We're hiring new people. We're expanding our facilities. We're going to increase our programming, but to do so, we need your support.
And that's in the light of the censorship we're getting. We're getting censored all over the place. We're still growing, and it's all because of you out there, and we thank you very much. And let me tell you something. With Omar Navarro's primary coming up, if Maxine Waters' little event, her little tweet off, with 10 people showing up is any indication, she doesn't have a chance. But you know how these things work. The incumbent has ways to make these things work for themselves. So we'll be right back. Roger Stone, Tyler Nixon. I'm Rob Dew. You're watching The War Room. Infowars.com/show is the free stream to send out to everybody you know. Welcome back to The War Room. I'm your host, Rob Dew. And as I said as we were going to break, we've got Roger Stone and now Tyler Nixon to cover the gambit of what is going on in this fake news Russian collusion delusion. They can't let it go. New book details Russia's decisive role in making Trump's campaign message go viral. You know, Roger, I think I may have cracked the case. I think the Russians were actually grabbing Americans out of their homes and making them go to Trump rallies. I think that's how Trump won. I mean, it was like gulag practice. They were rounding people up, putting them into buses. Oh wait, isn't that the Democrats that do that? Blow people onto buses and ship them around to make crowds look bigger? Yeah, maybe not.
Well, this piece is particularly extraordinary because it jams every discredited, phony, fake news meme, all of which I have answered ad nauseum into one new piece. But even Carl Cameron, who says I coordinated the cyber attacks between the Trump campaign and the Russians, that is, of course, false. There's no evidence of coordinating of messages. The 24-word exchange I had with somebody claiming to be Guccifer 2.0 6 weeks after the WikiLeaks material on the DNC had already been published certainly does not constitute any kind of coordination of messages. This is used as a fake hook for a story that's a compendium of falsehood. Tyler, I know you had a quick chance to look at this. What's your assessment?
I mean, it's a disgrace. It's terrible. It is, like you said, it's a compendium. I mean, I haven't gotten past 3 paragraphs and found at least 5 completely specious, distorted, or mischaracterized assertions. It is just rife. I mean, this is lawsuit material. I'll be honest with you. I mean, this is just outright defamation here. Here's in 2016, Cameron explained Stone helped Guccifer 2.0, who worked for Russian intelligence and other Russian-backed groups, boost an anti-Clinton narrative online targeted key groups. I've gone through all of the exchanges with you and Guccifer 2.0. This is like not even a brush-off conversation where you're like, okay, thanks, goodbye. You know what I mean? I wouldn't even, I mean, this is like bumping into somebody in the street. There were 24 words total in 3 messages that occurred over the span. I think the first couple were in succession, and then the last one was maybe a couple weeks later. It was just about asking about wrote campaign
this is what this says to me, Roger, just looking at this. You're so powerful and such a mastermind that you're able to outwit the entire intelligence apparatus, the NSA, James Clapper, John Brennan, James Comey. You're able to do this all from your house and using a Twitter account.
No, look,
Amazing.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty, as Jack Posobiec has pointed out, of believing CNN. This story says CNN pointed out that on August 12th, Stone said he knew that Assange had some of Clinton's emails. Duh, Assange said so on CNN in June of that year. So I'm guilty of following the WikiLeaks Twitter feed, of reading every interview with Assange, and by believing CNN. I don't want to waste a lot of time on this. It's yet another attempt to generate negative headlines that then the bots of David Brock and others boost into the stratosphere through enhanced SEO, continuing to further the Russian collusion delusion and to malign me, whether it is dining with Assange, which never happened, whether it was working with the Russians to hack the DNC. I doubt the DNC was hacked at all. Our lawsuit in which the DNC is suing me will hopefully prove that. But it's the same compendium of recycled BS. And frankly, as you pointed out earlier in the break, Tyler, there's more interesting things to talk about. For example, this is the 50th anniversary of the murder of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's a terrific new 4-part series on Netflix on Bobby Kennedy's brief but extraordinarily exciting presidential campaign in 1968. And like with the Kennedy assassination of John F. Kennedy, numerous questions remain. The coroner for Los Angeles County, Thomas Noguchi, has insisted in the autopsy that Kennedy was killed with a shot from the left rear temple at point blank range, yet Sirhan, the alleged assassin, was in front of him at all times. Now, the public fascination with the Robert F. Kennedy assassination has never been as broad as the murder of John F. Kennedy. But Robert Kennedy was putting together a new coalition based on economic populism and civil rights. He was trouble for the old Democratic Party establishment. We know that Dr. Martin Luther King was picked up on a wiretap by J. Edgar Hoover saying that he intended to endorse Robert Kennedy. And within weeks, both Robert Kennedy and Dr. King were dead.
By lone assassins. Always lone assassins who never get to testify.
Well, it's hard to believe that the Los Angeles Police Department could botch the investigation into Robert Kennedy's death. I don't know what did happen. I do believe that multiple witnesses claim that there were more than one shooter. Paul Schrade, who is featured in the Netflix documentary, was a labor coordinator for Robert Kennedy. He himself was shot. He believes there was more than one shooter. Until we get the answers to all these questions, they will always epically fascinate the public. Robert Kennedy was running as a law and order candidate, ironically. At the same time, he was running as a candidate of civil rights and a candidate of economic populism. I think he was a threat to the same people that his brother was a threat to in the deep state. So it is with a reverence that we remember Senator Kennedy. His son, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is a good man who has been in the forefront of the vaccination integrity movement, asking questions about the safety of vaccinations. Tyler, you have an observation here?
Well, I don't think you pretty much covered it, Roger.
Well, I just want to say this about vaccinations, and I did cover this earlier about a young girl who just celebrated her 1-year death anniversary after receiving her 4-month vaccination. She died 12 hours later in her crib. And I basically put this challenge out to people. Like, we really have to hold Trump's feet to the fire to this. Sure, I want to see the wall. Sure, I want to see the economy progress like it's doing now. But I also, I want to see protection involved and policies get in place that protect our children. That's what I want to see. And it starts with investigating the safety and efficacy of these vaccines that they want to inject in our children one after another.
I could not agree more. I'm still hopeful that the president will appoint the commission that he promised us. In any event, Roger Stone, Tyler Nixon, Rob Dew, we're going to ask Tyler to stick with us and talk about the pardons and the president's comments about them when we come back. In the meantime, please remember, we need your support at the Infowars.com store, and it's the single best place to get your copy of my new book, Stone's Rules. So thank you for joining us. We'll be.
Rob Dew here, your host of The War Room. We got Roger Stone, got Tyler Nixon on the line. I'm just going over this list of attendees for Bilderberg 2018, which we will be covering. We have a reporter en route at this point. Got other reporters joining him. Should be very interesting this year because the wave of populism is upon us. And the titans that have been in control, those who want to see a European Union, which is basically the vision of Hitler, are running scared. And we'll get into that in the third hour. Let's go back to Roger and Tyler Nixon. We're, I guess, finished up with Robert Kennedy. There was something, that iconic photograph. I want to say one thing, Roger, that iconic photograph of Robert Kennedy lying there on the floor. You know who's holding his head? And all the people around him, it's the busboy who's holding his head and actually took a rosary from his pocket and put it in his hands. I never knew that. They just re-interviewed him not too long ago.
It's very moving. Tyler, you had some thoughts on this anniversary.
Actually, yes, and it's interesting because the day of the assassination was my grandfather's 50th birthday, which makes today his 100th birthday. Stan Karmansky, good man. I just want to remember him. Would have been 100 today. Great man, actually. From dirt poor Polish immigrants. Obviously, a lot different than the life of Robert Kennedy. But Robert Kennedy was a hardball conservative, anti-communist, anti-mafia. He took on a lot of forces, and he was the hatchet man for his brother. He was the type of attorney general that if President Trump had someone with half of Robert Kennedy's loyalty and discretion, and understanding that you have to also protect the institution, not let the president be a target of his own people, of his own administration. And then, of course, his brother was brutally murdered. And I think it changed Kennedy and brought out his humane side. Unfortunately, though, he was immediately and would always be to them, to the deep state, and particularly to Lyndon Johnson, an existential threat if he ever became president. Because even though he signed off on the Warren Commission, at least publicly signed off on it, said, look, I stand by it. It is what it is. We know that Robert Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy, through French intelligence, had obtained intelligence that effectively said Lyndon Johnson was the center of it all, and he was sort of the prime mover for it. But, obviously it involved other elements. You'll notice that basically the Martin Luther King assassination, along with John F. Kennedy's, were the last sniper assassinations or attempted assassinations we've seen. After that, from all these up close assassinations, you had George Wallace shot at, you had Gerald Ford shot at, you had basically Kennedy was again an up close killing. So same goes for Mark David Chapman, who shot John Lennon. You had John Hinckley, who seemed like a space cadet as well, took a shot at Reagan. Roger, you can obviously weigh in on that. And funny that the last president that we really knew of to have a serious assassination attempt on him was Ronald Reagan. After that, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama. So I guess it comes down, you have to have somebody worth assassinating who isn't going to be assassinated by his own. So I find that, curious, but they did take out Martin Luther King and both Kennedy brothers, who were speaking of peace and humanity and justice and, de-escalation of war and those kinds of things and civil rights. And, they were cut down brutally in cold blood. I don't think people can comprehend the impact that this had. Roger, you lived through that time. I mean, I'm always curious how it affected you. I think people weren't as keyed in. They were, slaves to the television networks who just pushed the party line and buried things. You had to be a researcher to really know about it. But I'm curious, how did it strike you? Did it affect you?
Well, at the time, remember, we had a mainstream media monopoly dominated by 3 networks and 1 or 2 major national newspapers. And therefore, there was no market for alternative theories or research or information. And most Americans, at least initially, accepted the conclusions of the Warren Commission. Yet, stunningly, within 3 years, 61% of Americans, according to a Gallup poll, did not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald had acted alone. Since that time, the Warren Commission report has become decimated, including by the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 80s, giving, I think, understanding to the broader cast of characters involved in the murder of John Kennedy. I wrote a New York Times best-selling book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, in which I make the case that Lyndon Johnson had the motive, means, and opportunity. He was the greatest single beneficiary. He had relationships with others who had an intimate interest in replacing Kennedy, those being the Central Intelligence Agency, angry about the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, the organized crime, who had financed John Kennedy's election and then had felt double-crossed by Robert Kennedy's efforts to deport Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante. And then, of course, there was Big Texas Oil, who was upset with Kennedy about the repeal of the oil depletion tax. Add to the fact that John Kennedy was challenging the central banks, wanted to return to a hard dollar of either gold or silver, and you had a perfect storm where the entire political establishment had an inherent interest in replacing John Kennedy. None so much as Lyndon Johnson, who was facing prosecution in both Bobby Baker and Billy Sol Estes matters. So it is within that context that, yes, to this day, I believe that those who were involved in the murder of John F. Kennedy were essentially the same players involved in the murder of his brother. And I don't think there has been a definitive book on the Robert F. Kennedy murder. I read Chris Matthews' book about Bobby Kennedy. I don't know how he missed the fact that Ethel Kennedy was a bridesmaid at Joe McCarthy's wedding, or that Robert Kennedy's sister Eunice was the godmother to Senator Joseph McCarthy's only son, or that Bobby and Ethel were the only two Democrats essentially to attend Joe McCarthy's funeral. Those facts seem to have eluded Mr. Matthews.
Yes, here's the thing: is Bobby Kennedy was, I don't think, a vindictive man, but I think that if he became president, he would have made sure that justice was in some manner had in the death of his brother, which made him again a central target of Central Intelligence. Those involved with the assassination of his brother, and as we saw later, they have two ways now. I mean, they've had two ways. They can either kill the man, kill the person, as they did with JFK, as they did with RFK, as they did with Martin Luther King, and as they had to do with Reagan. The ones who can't be sort of compromised have to be killed. So you notice that unfortunately Richard Nixon, he suffered political assassination. A bunch of CIA plumbers running a botched operation that gets caught in the DNC. It's absurd. I mean, Nixon didn't, he wouldn't have been that stupid and brazen about it. I mean, his deal was to try to protect the presidency and to try to protect the institution from being just completely eroded and destroyed by these, hijinks that were going on. Not that he didn't necessarily condone it, but, the bottom line is this, though. Trump, I don't know. I don't think they can compromise him. I've been concerned about attempted assassination or premature death in office with him. Assassination is and has been and always was a real political tool. I mean, just because we're in a more media-based age and so forth, and they can character assassinate you much more easily or just erode you to death, as they have attempted with President Trump, with this miasma of fictional nonsense that they've been running on the country, a scam, a gigantic scam to politically assassinate Donald Trump with Russian collusion, Ellis, blaming it on the Russians, just exactly what they did with John F. Kennedy. Lee Harvey Oswald, he was a Russian. He had defected to Russia. That he was part of the Soviets. It's really, their playbook is very limited, and it's exposed.
All right, Tyler,
part of
30 seconds to go, just so you know.
MK Ultra, I'm aware. MK Ultra is a big part of that too. I think programmed assassins, mind control, that was real, folks, and they, the CIA definitely had his fingerprints all over Robert Kennedy's assassination. God rest his soul.
Great. Okay. So,
right.
Lawyer Tyler Nixon, Rob Dew, I'm Roger Stone. Thanks again for joining us at the War Room.
Final segment of the second hour of the War Room. I'm your host, Rob Dew. We had Tyler Nixon joining us and Roger Stone. Roger, I want to talk about this. This has been a meme that's been going around that Melania Trump is missing. Nobody knows who she is. Is she having a body double? So Steve Watson wrote the article, Body Double, ? Missing Melania Conspiracy Theory Perpetuated by Unhinged Leftists. And then we have, it was up on the Daily Mail. We finally have our spotting of Melania at an event for Gold Star veterans. And so how did this get created? She went in for a medical procedure and I guess just wanted to lie low for a while. I've heard other people have said they had the same kidney condition and it took them 3 months before they could even go outside. And she's done it in 25 days. So what do we know, Roger?
Well, and there was at least one media personality out claiming that her disappearance was somehow evidence of spousal abuse, which I think is outrageous. Melania Trump is a very private person. She's a very educated, very cultured, very decent person. She guards the privacy of her son and their family zealously. She has not asked to be in politics, but she has played the supportive role of a great first lady. These attacks on her are really unseemly. She had surgery. presumably it has taken some time for her to recover. But the idea that she's missing has now been disproved because she has shown up at a public function. She is obviously an enormously beautiful and unique individual. The idea that there is some body double who looks exactly like her is a little far-fetched, I believe.
Even Stephen Colbert got into the act. There's a link to that in this article, which also shows a lot of lengthy tweets from disdained liberals. We are in the kidney surgery is no big deal phase of conspiracy theorizing. Suddenly, every journalist in America is an expert on how long it takes to recover from kidney surgery. Those are people trying to talk sense into people. So somebody said, oh, she attended an event, and they go, what, you think that's proof? Yeah, here it is. First public appearance of FLOTUS in just under a month at the Gold Star Families Reception. And Lisa Evans goes, are you seriously offering that as proof? Like, what is, it's just unhinged.
It's pretty strange. It's not like she collapsed in public and had to be taken to an apartment house in 70-degree weather. Look, I think the attacks on her are part and parcel on the fact that the economy's running at about 4% growth in GDP. We're on the cusp of a historic peace deal in North Korea. Clearly, the president is making America great again. So now what do? We attack his wife, who I think has served as first lady with great dignity and great class. It really is pathetic that unfunny comedians like Stephen Colbert think they can score cheap shots on the first lady.
Wait, he's a comedian?
Yeah.
I thought he did a news show. I thought he was a real news broadcaster. I didn't know that was an act.
It really is disgusting, and it goes to show you the degeneracy of the left, the radical, screeching, squealing, rapacious, just malicious left. I mean, malevolent, really. There are people out there, they just don't care. I think if you're in the political arena, if you put yourself out there as, any politician does, as anybody who's an activist does to some extent, as a commentator or an opinion commentator would who has strong opinions, I think you should be held to task. You put yourself out there. You got to be in the arena. You got to be ready to face the the blows and whatever, and the dust and sweat and blood, so to speak. But for family members or just anybody, frankly, who's related or not so related, who doesn't speak out in a controversial way. Melania Trump is a class lady who is a very accomplished person. She's beautiful. I mean, whatever her relationship is with her husband, I don't think she wanted to be first lady. I don't think she thought he'd be president. To be honest, I mean, not that I don't think she thought it was possible, but I don't think she was prepared for it and prepared for the onslaught. So it really is disgusting. She's aware of her image, I'm sure. I mean, she's aware of, how could she not be? She's in the center of the spotlight, but really it's more of a spotlight of hatred in so many ways for all the people who love Melania Trump and think she's an accomplished class lady and a really just a fine person, a wonderful mother, and even, great wife, that these people just, will savage her and go after her. And you're dealing with like a pack of hyenas who are just race to the bottom. How disgusting. I mean, it's Gawker, like for that kind of stuff, exposing people's personal business. I just want to say real quick, there's a Netflix documentary about the shutting down of Gawker, or the dissolution of Gawker by way of Hulk Hogan's lawsuit funded by Peter Thiel. And it was posed as this like, oh my God, the First Amendment and blah, 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 or just freedom of speech, and they can shut you down. They were a disgusting, defamatory, I don't even know what to call them, it wasn't even tabloid, just exposing people's personal lives, celebrity or not. I mean, there's limits. I mean, just because people are in the public eye doesn't mean you can completely invade their lives. But this is part of the authoritarian mindset that we get. Same thing with our government. Our government does it too. We just don't, we're not privy to it. It's not released yet, right? So, it's just putting her, but it also exposes what degenerates we're dealing with in the leftists with their incessant bile and hatred. I mean, Roger, you're a big target for this. You know what I'm talking about. You can't walk the streets without someone, some screecher coming up at some point. Fortunately, I think in your case, they're a little scared, so I don't think they'd want to necessarily tangle with you because, you cut a mean sort of mafia-esque almost look when you're walking the streets of New York, and you get more people complimenting you.
I'm a warm and lovable guy, as you know.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
and guys, hold on. Notice this. We didn't hear a word from the left when no magazines were putting her on the cover of any of their magazines like they did the First Lady Michelle Obama when she became famous. We didn't hear a word about that. Like, that was okay. But now she wants to be a little private. It's like, oh, something's wrong. It's insanity.
The speculation, just go ahead, Roger.
In the meantime, the focus is on Bill Clinton's denials regarding Monica Lewinsky, a distasteful but consensual relationship. And the media continues to ignore the Juanita Broderick matter, the Kathleen Willey matter, the Paula Jones matter, and the long range of non-consensual sex, where the issue is not infidelity or indiscretion, but violence against women and rape. Once again, the media focus on the wrong place. I don't really care whether Bill Clinton had consensual extramarital relations. I never thought that he should have been impeached for that. His sins are, in this case, when it comes to the Me Too movement, are far, far more egregious. And I urge you to read The Clintons' War on Women by Roger Stone if you're interested in more information. I was very happy to see Juanita Broderick, who I think is a very brave woman, taking this head on Facebook and in a terrific interview at Breitbart.
She definitely has. And I just want to announce, too, that we're going to have our own little Me Too protest. Billy Clinton's going to be coming to Austin, Texas on June 10th. So we're going to be having the 4 to 6 show, the regular Sunday show. And then Owen Schroyer and crew are going to go out, and we're going to be going live probably from 6 to 8, maybe 6 to 8:30 at the Bass Concert Hall, which is right out. It's in the University of Texas, a little north of downtown in Austin. And we will be gathered there having our own little Me Too protest. Hopefully we can get Juanita Broderick on either Friday or Sunday to talk about the attacks Bill Clinton did to her and how the media just covers it up. They don't ever want to talk about it. The whole emphasis of that NBC News interview is all about the intern. I mean, it didn't even mention Juanita Broderick and the others that were harassed and raped and abused by Bill Clinton.
Well, and the good news, Rob, is you can still have time to go to the Infowars.com store now and buy your iconic Bill Clinton rape T-shirt to wear on that fateful day in Austin.
That is very true.
You raise a very good point. The media remains incorrectly focused on the entire question. Tyler, final thoughts?
I mean, similarly, Hillary Clinton. She's, national security crimes involving Obama. I mean, the FISA warrant, the phony dossier, the whole Russian collusion hoax. I mean, this is a crime. This is a seditious crime against our country. They don't want to cover that. It's all about so-called Russian collusion involving you, which is completely made up by Think Progress and their hit team of. By the way, just so you know, Carl Cameron works at a New Frontier Data with the guy who wrote this article. So this is a Democratic-backed cannabis big data company. So, let's not kid ourselves here. We're not dealing with a legitimate outlet. This is, this piece against you, Roger, just to touch on it, needs action taken because they've defamed you here.
Well, I'm certainly disappointed in Carl because he has overstated his case, to say the least. Tyler Nixon, thanks for joining us here on the War Room. Rob Dew is going to take it going forward. Many thanks. And folks, go to the Infowars.com store now. We need your support for the continued expansion of what we're doing here at InfoWars and beat back the harassment.